This is a brand new episode of Wake Up Right. Wake up. With your workout buddies, April and sometimes Yenna. Your hit podcast. Your much needed hit of encouragement, empowerment, and motivation to live and grow each day a little brighter.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. We have Erin back again. We want to talk about one of the questions that was asked, how to respond when people around you or you feel even self-sabotaging your journey. And so we're just going to talk about that, have a good conversation. Before we dive in, welcome, Erin. How are you?
Good. It's good to be back again. I hope Yenna's not getting too jealous yet. But no, it's good to be back. Round 3.
So sabotaging can come from anywhere in our lives. I feel like most often we experience self-sabotaging. I feel like that's the number one thing that most people on any kind of journey or with any kind of goals, it doesn't have to be weight loss. I feel like we have a tendency to get in our own way, to trip ourselves up. And Erin and I actually have talked about this, I think, in both podcasts.
I think a lot of it is, subconsciously done. And even when it's affected by others.
I think too. So I listen to this psychologist I think there's a few psychologists that I like to listen to on Instagram, on YouTube, and I like to read their books and different things like that. One in particular, he speaks a lot about kind of treating yourself like you're someone to contend with. Like, I think a lot of times too, when we start to sabotage ourselves, it can be like the bratty version of us when we were 7, when someone's like, clean your room, but you had just started cleaning your room. Maybe this is more like a 13-year-old type mindset, but like you're already going to clean your room and then mom's like, clean your room. And you're like, I will never clean my room. Like, I feel like giving ourselves ultimatums without some room to grow forward ends up sabotaging us a lot. Also, I think that the reverse of that's true. Giving ourselves too much room can also be a way that leads to like sabotaging our efforts when the boundaries that we've set are too broad.
Yeah.
So like a bowling lane and you're going all the way to the gutter, like instead you just gotta pop some bumpers up so that way you get down to the pins.
Well, and by the way, I think you're right. So also what you said about 7 years old, I think there's actually something else to that, where a lot of the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, or the habits that we have, or the ways of thinking about ourselves, are really established in our childhood. And by the time we're 7 or 8 years old, a lot of those ways that we see and think of ourselves it becomes ingrained in who we are and how we view the world and how we view ourselves. So breaking through those boundaries and that way of thinking about ourselves can be difficult. And it takes really a concerted effort and focus at times. You hear my dog? She's barking in the background. Sorry.
No worries.
But I really do. I think that's a big thing, and it takes, some effort to overcome. And it's not so easy. It's easier said than done, as a matter of fact. So, okay.
I think with self-sabotage, I think that one is the most important thing to control is what we can in ourselves. As far as self-sabotage, I feel like if we have built a good foundation, if we have like those conversations with ourselves and set good boundaries, then we're more capable of holding ourselves accountable and growing and becoming better at our processes. So I think that's one reason why Erin and I talked about how we were going to talk about the different, because there's sabotage, like self-sabotage, your friends can sabotage you, your family, random people on the interwebs, your neighbors, if you're in school, different social groups can have like toxic behaviors and gossip towards you that like affects you and essentially can get in the way of your journey. But I think it all comes back to, I think you had a quote for this, Aaron.
Yes. And so there's something that I've learned to adopt in my own life. And I say this often to people, which is we can't control what others do, but we can control how we let them affect us or how we react to others. So it's so true. And it's even true with ourselves, right? At the end of the day, we control how we also let ourselves derail ourselves, whether we think so or not. We are in the driver's seat. So a lot of people, most people actually, unfortunately get affected by what other people say, what other people think. One of the most powerful moments in my life was when I learned to stop caring as much about what other people thought. And that moment was so freeing to me. And it allowed me to be more of myself than I ever was. It allowed me to be more creative, find my creativity, allowed me to do what I'm doing now, which I never thought I could ever do, right? I didn't necessarily believe that I had in me what I'm doing now. Because I had people telling me, you can't do that, or that's whatever, and you're not going to be successful at this. And, once I was able to kind of stop that negative talk from affecting me, from people who I gave too much power to over me, and I took that power back to myself through basically what I said in that quote, I control if I let them affect me or how I then react to them and what they say or do. And when I put those barriers up and I enforced them and I learned how to mitigate it properly, you know what? I relatively speaking, created a Teflon barrier around myself that enabled me to get past that issue for the most part. Now, it's things like that still can affect me at times, but for the most part, I let things roll off my shoulders now much, much more than ever before in my life. And it's been so empowering. So that's kind of where I wanted to go. But that's the overarching thing that I want to really, leave everybody with today, even though we're just starting. But we're going to discuss more in depth a lot of the different things that are components here, because I think it's so important, because so many people out there really deal with this and need to sometimes take a step back and look at themselves, at their lives, at how they maybe, even derailing or, derailing themselves or sabotaging themselves from achieving their own success and happiness. So, I think this is such an important conversation, and I'm grateful for the people who did bring this up. And by the way, with that said, I just want to tell everyone who's listening or watching this right now, we would love for you to put more of these types of questions or comments into the comment section of these videos, because, if there are some really good questions or topics,
email us if you're listening to the podcast.
that too. We would love to hear what you guys want to just hear discussed or topics covered. And if it's a good one, we'll definitely add it to the queue and cover it in a future podcast or video here.
Yeah, definitely. So I was thinking when you were sharing your quote, and I think a lot of people have heard it before. And I think breaking down what it means is usually it can be helpful. Things that we commonly hear, we sometimes dismiss. And it also made me think about when my husband and I got engaged. It was like a religious counseling. And one of the classes, if you will, was specifically on controlling what you can control. And so for those of you watching, this is not going to be super, super fancy or anything. And for those of you listening, just imagine I'm drawing a tiny little circle and I'm kind of coloring it in.
These are not FitLabb graphics.
Yeah, that's what we can control.
There you go.
And then this is everything else.
Yep.
And maybe there's other layers. But the reality is there's not much in life that we can control. Deciding where it fits, is it in your control, really? And I think in order to figure out what is in your control, you have to figure out what you actually want.
Yes.
So what do you
priorities
want in life?
too.
What do you want priorities? What do you want your daily life to be and why? And then once you kind of have established that, like once you start to find your own identity, it's easier to control your little bubble. But I think we spend a lot of time out here in like the random stuff we have no control of. and we don't spend enough time here. And that leads to problems. It leads to like not having a feeling of identity and not being able to stand up for ourselves and not being able to just, like I said, take up for the things that you want, take up for the people around you that you love, whatever it is. There are things that you can control, and you can't control how other people react to you, to your boundaries, to your goals. You can't control other people at all. You can only control yourself, and you can't even control the things that happen to you. You can only control how you're reacting to them.
True. By the way, that was starting to look a little like someone had pink eye.
Yeah, I was thinking like pink eye, and when I first drew it, I really regretted it. I think I need to do an overlay of graphic because I'm like,
no, that was fine. I'm just kidding around.
Yeah.
But no,
in my mind, it was going to be like so much better. And I'm like, oh, hey, April, you can't even draw a circle.
You know what? In the future, let me know when you want a good graphic. I'll make a FitLabb video graphic for you. We'll pop it on the screen. No, it's true though, actually. Another thing that to add on to what you just said is kind of goes with what I said before, which is you can only worry about what you can control. Okay. Because so many people worry about the what ifs and what if this happens and, oh my God, then like anything that's out of their control, people get so worried and stressed out over. But at the end of the day, you can't control, you have no control over if those things happen, if they don't happen, how they may impact or not. The only thing you can worry about is what is within your realm, within your wheelhouse, and that you have some degree of control over, because you can change those things. If you can't change something, there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing to worry about, right? So that's another important way to think of these things. So
I think that's an important way to think about it, but I also think it's equally important to accept the fact, like, you're going to worry about things that you have no control over. That is going to happen. It can set you back. I think a way to overcome that hurdle is to practice breaking it down.
True.
Like, oh, I'm so worried about, my child's first day of school. Like, it's really stressing me out. Are they going to have a good teacher? Like, and then working it back to what you actually can do. You can help your child prepare for success by like having conversations with your child about what to expect in school. And you can have conversations with yourself about how you're going to react, and things that you're going to lean into. And we do have a sphere of influence too. And I think it's important to the people that we can influence, that we are calm and we have those conversations where we work through issues, because it helps them do the same. And I think it's equally important to surround yourself, like your sphere of influence, the people that you allow influence you, that those are people who are driven to break things down and look at them like, is this something that is controllable, or is this something that's not? Because if you have people that are determined to be in a frantic state of negative, toxic behavior, always focused on the negative, like there's going to be negative in every situation. Life's a balance. There's usually not anything that can happen that doesn't have some sort of negative and some sort of positive. And it can be like really, really positive with very little negative, or really little negative with a lot of positive. And you'll have people that will only focus on that one negative thing, totally, no matter how positive it is. And then you'll have the people who are so positive that they never see any negative. So you have like this balance, or it's not really a balance, it's an imbalance of personality types, and being very aware.
I agree. And I think to add to that, it's so important to think about that from the standpoint of who you surround yourself with, who you choose to surround yourself with. Now, family, you can't necessarily choose, right? You have parents, whatever, your kids, like you can't exactly choose who you're, born from and who your kids are. But what you can choose is how you let them affect you, but also you can also choose your friends. So one thing I learned as I grew up and then got older is I learned to keep limit my friends to, whatever circle I felt was appropriate. It's not about how many friends you have. It's about the quality and who makes you better, who is honest with you and doesn't just tell you what you want to hear, but they tell you sometimes what you need to hear, but with coming from a place of love, right? Coming from a place of caring about you and your best interest. So if they challenge you, it's with a positive reason behind it. It's not just to challenge you to be, annoying or a jerk. They're trying to push you to be better or to help you in some way, and while at times I'm sure that could be annoying if they keep doing it too much, it is a positive thing. But I've learned to really break down, and even limit my group of friends at times, because, if someone is not being a positive or at least a good influence on me or my family or my kids or whatever, you want to just have those good people around you who somehow add to your life and make you better, and you do the same for them. Right. And that, they don't have to be like the most positive person in the world. You're right. It is a balancing act. So, and one of the actual ways that I think that, people do self-sabotage is by being negative, right? By being too negative, seeing the glass as half empty rather than half full. Well, and there are times where seeing the glass half empty can be helpful because it may help you in certain aspects. Being too negative, being too hard on yourself, putting yourself down, overanalyzing everything, trying to be a perfectionist, which I'm guilty of sometimes. But all these things can sometimes cause you to self-sabotage, right? And I think that it's just important to recognize that as one of the areas where people can sometimes talk themselves out of something or prevent themselves from ever even starting on a positive path that they're totally able to do and should do.
Yeah, I think that that's a very important point. And before we segue to like friends completely or family completely, going back to self-sabotage, sometimes it's good to write it down. Like if you have goals and you feel like you're getting in your own way, like just journaling it out and trying to track what you're doing. How are you getting in your own way? And like Aaron was saying, a lot of times that looks like overthinking, overcomplicating, and then overjudging ourselves, which is why, like on my journey, for instance, I try outwardly, especially, to share as much positivity about continuing forward, because every point in my life where I've ever done anything like this, it is all or none, perfect or failure. There's no like failing forward or falling forward as you fell. Like, and I feel like while not perfect, over the past year, 13 months, I really started to heal some of my thinking that it has to be all one way, that it has to be the max perfection. It can't just be like baby stepping forward. It never really registered to me before what a lifestyle change looks like. It was all diet culture. It was eating perfectly, exercising perfectly and intensely, and having the reflection on the scale consistently. And if any of those things didn't happen, it would send me in a tailspin. And over the course of the last year, that hasn't been the case. And I feel like the biggest change for me is allowing myself the space to look at big picture as opposed to zeroing in, while still charting and kind of keeping progress reports. And I think YouTube's been very helpful for me in that way, like kind of keeping myself accountable. But going back to this, you have to find what you want in life. Like you have to figure it out, what you want, how you want your day-to-day life to look. And then you really have to zero in on eliminating the toxic behaviors that you perpetuate, or going back to other people that maybe other people are bringing into your life. And it doesn't always look so clear cut, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be right. If someone's behaviors, they don't have to be a bad person to be affecting you negatively. And that's a very important thing. Just because someone is bad for you or helps you stay in a negative mind space. Doesn't mean they're a bad person. Doesn't mean that you're better than them. It just means that that's not part of your journey at that particular moment. It's not a me or them pitting people against each other. And I think that's important to do with yourself too. It's not about being who you are, being bad. It's about being better each day.
I totally agree. I live my life like that, right? I have the mentality of being totally open-minded and trying to live every day to be better than I was yesterday in some way, learning something new every day. As much of an expert as I may be in what I do, I love the fact that I can learn something new every single day, even still, whether it's even just appreciating someone's perspective who may differ from my own, and maybe taking that into account in my own way of thinking about something or my own knowledge base, and saying, oh, there might be other ways other than what I know. Because I'm, like I said before, I'm a little guilty of being a perfectionist. And I can tell you from experience that when I started, this whole journey on YouTube and starting FitLabb and, as a platform and everything, it took me longer than it should have, in part because of my perfectionism, where I have that sometimes holding me back, had that holding me back, and where I wanted to do everything perfectly. I didn't even know how to make a video at the time. Right. So, and this goes, you could take this and put it into fitness or anything, but I didn't know how to do any of that. And I needed to do it perfectly out of the gates. I didn't know how. So it delayed a little bit, and I kept on building onto it. So, these are the kinds of ways that even I'm guilty of having it hold me back at times, and learning to let that go and just start wherever you're at. And then slowly over time, or, at your own healthy pace, build upon whatever foundation you have already. I think that's the best way to think about it, and to follow a path like that. So, because, putting this into the weight loss or fitness or exercise realm, I think a lot of people like to, or unfortunately, just doubt themselves. They think that, losing weight or starting an exercise program might be too hard. They doubt themselves or their ability to do it. They have an all or nothing way of thinking about it. And that can cripple people at times. That can cripple them. It can stop them from starting. And it can even cause, also turn into procrastination, which is another thing that we've actually talked a little bit about this in one of the previous podcasts about, kind of kicking the can down the road, where someone will say, well, I'm going to start exercising on Monday and it's Thursday. Okay. Or I'm going to start exercising at the first of the next month, or January 1st, New Year's Day. That's a big one for everybody. And that procrastination is a really big way that we also self-sabotage, because, the reality of it is, what's going to change on that day? What's going to change? If we are kicking the can down the road, it's good to be conscious of it and really think about, well, why am I actually delaying this? It's usually a signal that either someone is not committed to it, or there might be other underlying thought processes going on that you may not even be aware of. There might be that self-doubt. There might be an imposter syndrome piece going on. There might be some other reasons underlying that are causing it.
It's so overwhelming.
That too.
To do everything.
Yeah.
So I think kind of zeroing in on preventing self-sabotage, and we are not experts. We are not mental health professionals or anything like that. This is just our opinions. But one, finding ways to focus on what you can control. And to Aaron's point he just made, focusing on what you can do right now, instead of what you want to do, or you feel you should be able to do, or what you can do next week. What can you do right now, today, to live a little bit better, to start your journey right now? And maybe that looks like 5 minutes walking outside. Or let's say you have financial concerns. Maybe it looks like actually looking at your bank statements. Maybe you never look at your bank statements. And maybe a budget is too overwhelming for you right now. So it's picking something that you can do for whatever it is that hangs you up and causes you an exorbitant amount of stress in life. It's identifying small tasks that you can do to start chipping away. Yeah. At the bigger issue. And then you'll get there. And once you start doing that, become protective of your space, like not in a super guarded and like toxic way. You don't want that, but like it's your space. It's so easy to, I think, for us to, when we do that negative self-talk, or when the imposter syndrome you were talking about, when we have like these negative thoughts in our head, when other people say things and it aligns with the negative self-talk that we have, just like blows us up. It's just like so horrible, because it's like, well, is it true? No, it's probably not true.
No, it's probably not true. The reality is people like to knock others down. And we have to realize that, that's not usually the reality, right? By the way, I love what you said about focus on the little things that you can do, because you know what, as you start to do those things, there's a snowball effect. There is a snowball effect. And as you start succeeding in doing these little things, these positive changes, these habits that you're now forming, the healthy ones or the positive ones, it starts to snowball, and the snowball gets bigger and bigger as it rolls down the hill, because now you start incorporating other things. Now that you've felt successful doing X, Y, and Z, now you start incorporating A, B, and C behaviors or changes that are also starting to build on each other. And it becomes eventually it really turns into something great. And you prove to yourself, hey, all this stuff that I said I couldn't do, guess what? I did it. And I also find it very helpful, instead of focusing on just what you can't do, focus on what you can do. There's a lot of people not they like to, but they do focus on what they cannot do. And that also is a defeating thought process. That's like the thinking that, the glass is half empty versus half full. So instead of thinking about why you can't do something or why you're not going to be successful doing something, think about how you can be successful, why you can, and what could you do to be successful in that endeavor, whatever it may be. And that is a better way to think about it.
A lot of times we feel like we need other people's approval to do things.
That's true.
I think leaning into when you just don't want to do something.
Yeah.
If you just don't want to do it, like you will start to feel empowered by saying no to yourself. Like maybe it's a great goal to have to only eat organic chicken, but it doesn't fit your budget, doesn't fit your lifestyle. It's not realistic. So freeing yourself from like that, and this is probably the worst example, but it was the first thing that came to mind. Like
only organic chicken. I know what you mean though.
Yeah. Freeing yourself from the expectation that to live a healthy life, and we could just open it up to organic food. To really live a healthy life, you need to only eat organic foods. Like that's not realistic for most people. It's not realistic for me in my household. Like it's not realistic for most people. And so just eliminating that expectation altogether, like you don't have to do it. No one's going to make you do life. So it's important to focus on the little things that you can do, the little things that you want to do, because if you don't, and you focus on the things that hang you up, you focus on what you're worried about, and you let anxiety and things like that stop you. It's not so simple. I'm not oversimplifying.
Oh, it's definitely not so simple. Yeah.
But there are things, if we let the negativity in our lives stop us, so we won't live life. We just won't live our lives. And then our life will pass us by and we'll be 80 with regrets if we're lucky. If it's someone like me who has a dramatic amount of weight to lose, I would hate to see what 80 would look like if I don't get this weight off. And if it takes me 10 years, it's not going to take me 10 years.
It's not going to take you 10 years. But I know what you mean. I know exactly what you're saying.
Let's say it did. Let's say it took me 10 years and I got to a healthy weight for my frame. My quality of life for the rest of my life would be so much better. So if it can take the time it's going to take, focusing on continuing forward and progress and celebrating the progress that you find in your life with whatever your goal is important to enjoy. You got to enjoy right now, this moment. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bright, happy moment, but You got to own your moments.
By the way, I think also it's
How you have
important to acknowledge. I love that, but I think it's also important to acknowledge that, you know, a lot of people also get derailed or sabotaged by if they hit a roadblock, if they hit a hurdle in their progress. And
Yeah.
and you know, that, by the way, that is totally normal. It is absolutely normal and totally fine because it happens to everybody. I think we talked about this in the last podcast, so I'm not going to go too much into this part of it, but failure is the natural part of everything. The only way you're going to succeed is through failing and learning how to then be successful from your failures. So, you know, a lot of people do beat themselves up though when they hit a little roadblock or a speed bump in the path in their road to success or to whatever they want to do. And it's important to acknowledge, take a step back, not feel defeated, not feel bad about, you know, a failure or an issue that may have come up that derailed you a bit, but just say, you know, it's okay. I forgive myself if it was something that had to do with whatever you did. Everyone makes mistakes, and acknowledging it, you know, basically allowing yourself to forgive yourself and then move past it, having learned something from it, and say, it's okay. It's okay that it may happen even again. As long as I learn from it and I continue forward and allow myself to have that experience without it making me feel like I'm bad or I'm terrible or I'm a failure because I did that. That's not, you know, I see that happen a lot. And I think it's important to not let that derail ourselves, because it can be a powerful negative force if we let it have too much of a voice in our head about this. So
there's someone else that I follow. Her name is Needra Twaab. I may not be saying her last name right. I really hope I am. But she's a psychologist, and I've talked about her on my channel quite a bit. So you may have heard me, if you watch my YouTube channel, talk about her there. And this is kind of segueing into other people. And this is just something to consider. Like, I feel like this is a good starting point. It's kind of like a hard left that we're taking, but the post she shared was, this isn't about you. And there's 4 bullet points. This isn't about you. When people are hard on you, they are twice as hard on themselves.
Very true.
When people share their judgments about you, it's based on their ideas about themselves and their experiences. When people are upset with you for setting a boundary, it's based on their inability to accept boundaries or their own personal lack of boundaries. When people place limits on what you can do, they have limited themselves in the same way. And I think each one of these are pretty powerful as we start to segue into being sabotaged by the people around us. So I'm going to read these one more time really quickly. When people are hard on you, they are twice as hard on themselves. When people share their judgments about you, it's based on their ideas about themselves and their experiences. When people are upset with you for setting a boundary, it's based on their inability to accept boundaries or their lack of boundaries. When people place limits on what you can do, they have limited themselves in the same way. So we want to surround ourselves by the best possible people that we can. And I think that starts with being the best person that you can be, which is why I wanted to kind of start with ourselves in the very limited bubble that we actually can control. It's very small. It's a very small bubble of things that we can actually control in life. And then as we start to share our little tiny bubbles with the people that we love, we can't even control our whole little bubble. And then when you have kids, it's even less of your little bubble that you can 100% control.
The 2 kids in my house, I could speak to that one, definitely.
So, I mean, you give up a little tiny bits of your bubble when you have friends, when you have significant others, when you have children, with your families, and the amount of influence. But there's different levels of power that we have to set boundaries with all of those groups of people. And I think like that will be a good segue into, which would you rather segue into, Aaron? Would you rather segue into like friends who sabotage or significant others, which was significant others was the specific question, or family.
I think we do the family first.
Okay.
Yeah, because and then because friends will play into it as well, but family I think is probably the one that is the hardest for most people.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
No, you were gonna do it.
I have no idea what I was gonna say. Oh. I have no idea. I was going to say something.
So I think this is a very important topic in terms of how we let others sabotage us. Because look, there's, like you said, there's many different ways, friends and family. I think it's important to start with family first, because there's so many different ways that this can happen. And it's a really complex topic. And I don't claim to be an expert in this, all right? But I've actually seen this happen many times over the years, whether with friends of mine or clients of mine or many other people, right? Where their families get in their heads, or their families have a certain way of thinking about something or seeing things, or seeing them as how they fit into the family unit or in the world. There are expectations put on people, right? And all of those things in their own selves have the ability or capability to cause you to be sabotaged by, or derailed from whatever path you want to be on or you are on, by expectations or narratives that your family, whether it's parents, whether it's siblings or your significant other, place on you. There's so many different directions we can go here. And I feel like we could probably talk about this for way longer than we want. But, there's many different ways that this happens. I can speak from, most from a fitness standpoint, because that's what I've seen probably the most, where let's say someone, there is in a married relationship or they're living together with their significant other, and they may have had a certain lifestyle. They're comfortable, whatever. And it's more of a sedentary lifestyle. They're not really active. And I'm not like saying that's, bad. I'm not like, whatever. I'm just, but at the end of the day, what happens is what I've seen play out a lot of the time is when one person in that relationship maybe wakes up one day and says, I've been thinking about getting in shape. I've been thinking about making some positive changes in my life. And there maybe was not a conversation had between the two partners about this. Maybe there was, but they wake up one day and they say, I'm going to start down this new path. And they do. And the other person was maybe not part of it and is not ready to make that change. There can be so many different dynamics that start to play out, right? And from what, again, this is just a specific example or two, but I've seen it happen where one of the partner that maybe wasn't ready to make that change is unhappy about it, not because they don't want the best for their partner necessarily, but because maybe there's jealousy playing out. They don't want to be left behind. Maybe they feel like their time with their husband or wife or significant other is now being taken away from them by something that they're not involved with or are not a part of, because they don't want to do it, or they're not ready to, or it can evoke some jealous feelings. I've even seen it go to some extreme levels where someone thinks that someone's starting a fitness journey because they want to like cheat on them. And probably 9 times out of 10, that's not the case at all. Right. Maybe even more than that. But these are things that can play out. And this is just one of many, many different ways that I've actually seen sometimes family members can really sabotage someone's fitness journey or someone's desire to make an improvement in their life in some way, shape, or form. So, I'm sure there's many different examples we could give, but these are just very interesting ways that this plays out sometimes.
I think going back to family, the way your parents were raised impacts them. The way you were raised impacts you. The way you raise
Absolutely.
your children will impact your children. With that, there are things that are passed down generationally. So reflecting on the way things are, it may not be for you. And when you pull away and start making changes, it feels personal. Sometimes your family will feel attacked by you making healthy and good choices for yourself on so many different levels. This can be a fitness or just maybe mental health or like your lifestyle. People will take it personally. They can't handle it very well. So being patient while setting boundaries that you respect and that you insist the loved ones around you respect can be very key to preventing other people from sabotaging you on your journey. It's usually not, more times than not, it's not going to be, people are not sabotaging you on your journey because they're ill-intentioned or they're bad people. You know, maybe you and your best friend, every single Tuesday, you have ladies' night where you go eat unlimited amounts of pasta and have whatever you want. And during that time you share together, your friend confides in you and you confide in your friend. And it's like it really built your whole relationships on. And then you decide today's the day. I'm not going to eat copious amounts of pasta ever, not even at girls' night. And then you show up, or maybe you're fearful to show up, so you cancel. And it starts creating wedges. But having conversations, it's so hard to do, but I feel like more times than not, people feel so much better after they do. And also what we were talking about earlier on focusing on what you can do is really important, because the reality is you don't need to stop living all aspects of your life to start a health journey. While going and eating like unlimited pasta would be a bad idea, maybe you could have unlimited salad, or maybe you go and you just order a water and you just spend the time together, and your friend can eat pasta if they want, and you just go, you eat before.
Yeah, we all have the choice. We all have the ability to make our own choices. I think the issue becomes that in those situations, are the people that you surround yourself with, or that you have around you, meaning your family and your friends, are they also respecting the boundaries that you may now have set for yourself? And I've seen a lot of the times where, we all don't have the same goals for ourselves. We all don't share the common goals, right? And we don't have to. We all have our own lives to live however we choose to. But a lot of the time, friends or even family may not understand the why, or, of a goal that you've now set for yourself, or a boundary that you've now set. And they may not, intentionally, sometimes it is intentional, sometimes it's not. They may not respect the boundary because they don't understand it. They're not a part of it, or maybe they're even jealous of it in some way. Right. Yeah. So there's all these different ways that this can play out. Like I know 6 years ago, for me, I got out of shape. This is all relative. I had to lose 30 pounds. This was, again, 6 years ago. And, it happened quickly. I had a stressful year. We had our second son. And, there were so many hosts of reasons and factors that went into this. And I remember I woke up one day and like all of a sudden realized, like, oh my God, what happened? And when I started that journey to lose those 30 pounds, and I did it successfully, and I got, again, at the end of that, I got into the best shape of my life. But I remember going through that process and having people. I was always leading a healthy lifestyle generally before that, but I had people who saw what I was doing then after, like I was tracking my macros, and it didn't affect me. I'm a numbers person like that. That's like how my mind works. So it didn't negatively affect me, but I had people like friends making fun of me for doing it. I had, people like calling me out, like, what are you doing? Just enjoy your life. I'm like, this is how I am enjoying my life right now. This is what I choose to do. So they were like passing judgment that I'm not enjoying my life because I'm doing whatever I was doing. But to me, that was fine. It had no negative impact on me. I had to just kind of push that out of my mind and realize that, they're passing judgment based on their own experiences, based on their own feelings about certain things, and to let that slide and not let that derail me or bother me. And sometimes I would explain it if I felt it was necessary or appropriate. And other times I would just say, hey, come on, I'm happy. Be happy for me. This is what I'm doing. And you know what? I'm doing it the right way. It's all that matters. And for the most part, it was fine. But if I didn't set those boundaries, if I didn't like, kind of protect what I was doing within that realm, then, it could have maybe negatively affected what I was doing. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting because that also is how friends can possibly play a role, right? There's so many different directions we could talk about here and go in, but
I think more importantly than talking about, so there's so many ways that I think it comes down to, there's so many ways that people can sabotage you if you give them the power.
Yes.
To do it. And one of the best ways to take away the power of other people is to have a conversation from a calm and good place and just set forth your boundary, your expectation. People will not know your expectations for them, your expectations for yourself, your boundaries, if you don't say them. And that's a hard thing to start doing, especially if you've lived your life not setting them and not having them. So establishing what you want for you, and then working and being forgiving with yourself as you work to be able to uphold your boundaries. And that's why I think like counseling is such a great thing. If you are like, family counseling could be a great thing, especially if there is, like, depending on what kind of generational curses your family may have struggled with, like going to counseling as a family. I mean, even if you're, a grown adult, going to counseling with your family can have benefits.
Oh, I firmly believe there is not one person on earth that could not benefit from some sort of, therapy or counseling. I know there's a lot of people that are averse to it because there's stigmas attached. There's a lot of stigmas attached to going to therapy or counseling, and there's a lot of people with too much pride to maybe do it, or they don't want to, people like to surround themselves with like this Teflon barrier. I'm perfect. I have nothing to admit, or I have nothing wrong with me. The irony is those are the people who usually have the most that they have to fix, because that's actually that like shield that they're trying to protect themselves with of not admitting any fault or flaws. That's really just a method that they use subconsciously to hide, to kind of not to protect their self and how they feel about themselves. It's a false like barrier, right? And those are the people that need the most help usually, because if you can admit if you've made a mistake, if you can say, I'm sorry, if you can try to be better than you were yesterday, and even, seek help if you feel you need it, that's the sign of a person who wants to become better, who recognizes that nobody's perfect, that we all have flaws, we all have problems, we all make mistakes, but they want to be better, and they're open, and they are open-minded, and therefore they will become better. They will become more successful in whatever they're trying to work on. I'm not judging people by saying this, but that's the sign of someone who will ultimately thrive and become better every day. If you never want to own up to things, if you never want to, admit faults or flaws, that's not how you grow. That's not how you improve. And that's true in so many aspects in life.
And I think too, I mean, if you are someone who struggles in those ways, it's with everything else. We are all works in progress. I wouldn't set an expectation for any of my loved ones or for myself that I wake up tomorrow perfectly able to accept all of the boundaries around me without question. Of course we ideally want to, but we unknowingly do things all of the time. So approaching situations as kindly and as lovingly as we can, especially when it comes to friends and family, and
respecting each other. That's really what it comes down to.
And as far as your family and your friends, a very tough thing could be letting those friendships or those relationships have space that they need. If you have goals and it is imperative that you achieve your goals, let's say it's, for me, for instance, continuously losing weight. I don't feel like I have to lose a lot of weight tomorrow. Would that be nice? Yes, but only if I can sustain the weight loss. I only want to lose the weight in a way that I can sustain it, however long that takes me. But if there's somebody in my life that gets in the way and prevents me and I give them the power to do so, like I need to do whatever necessary to get that power and that control of myself back. So if that includes, like, let's say, and this is 100% not the case, but let's say my mom was very anti me eating healthy. And every time I talk to her, even though I've expressed and shared boundaries and she's understood them, like she keeps pressing like, oh, or we can take it back to the friend and like the pasta night. Let's say you decide you're going to go and you're just going to drink water and your friend feels insecure because she's the only one eating pasta and she deflects that to you. Maybe it's time to stop going. Like if your friend can't accept you as you are, where you're at, and you can't do what they would like for you to do, then some space could be warranted. And that gets a lot harder when it is your spouse, because you can't just get that sort of space from your spouse.
So this is where it becomes very difficult to mitigate, and I've unfortunately seen so many people who, and it breaks my heart when I see this happen, that someone's spouse just doesn't understand. They can't hear their partner and the reasons that they're trying to do something or improve their life. And they, like everyone's different. We all have different things that drive us, that motivate us, or where we come from in life and ways of thinking of things. And, that's part of what makes the world so great. It makes the world go round, right? It makes it interesting. And sometimes it's what makes us people attracted to each other. But if being a good partner, a good spouse to one another also involves being understanding, being able to hear each other and understand where you're at and trying to just be supportive, as long as it's something that's a positive thing or productive thing. Well, I guess I should also say, who are we to judge what is necessarily productive or positive, right? Yeah. If it's productive or positive for that person, even if we may not always see it exactly that way, maybe it is very productive and positive for them. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here with my little ADD.
Well, as you were talking, I was kind of thinking a lot of times when we fail, and we're going to just talk about weight loss right now, it's because I'm like, okay, so on Tuesday, I'm going to start my new lifestyle and I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to work out for an hour and I'm only going to eat salads and I'm not doing any eating out. And I also am going to do X, Y, and Z on top of that. And then we plan for it and Tuesday comes and we completely change our life. But when we're married, you share your life, you share so much of it. And to have the expectation that you are going to completely overhaul your life and expect your partner to immediately get on board is not realistic and it's not fair.
Totally agree. So these have to be conversations that are had, and there has to be compromises made.
And when you've overhauled your life like that 100 times, your spouse is not going to be as supportive as potentially they could. And I'm not saying you should accept any sort of like abuse or toxic behavior or anything like that. Not at all. But let's say, you're on your 10th. I'm going to start on Tuesday of the last 3 months. And you say, I'm starting on Tuesday, and your significant other just rolls their eyes. This is where starting with what you can do right now today is huge. Today, you can go for a 15-minute walk outside.
Absolutely.
And that's all you need to do. And as you ease into a healthy lifestyle, you're more likely to sustain it and be successful. And it's more likely that when you start taking an evening walk, eventually your significant, it's not 100%. This is not like a guaranteed recipe for success, but your significant other might start doing it too. I've been on my weight loss journey for over a year, and my husband is since we moved, he's just now kind of interested in these things. He had different priorities getting through the school that he was in, and now he's able to, and I've been doing this all along. And so we're complementing each other with our goals. Now, he never picked apart my goals or was unsupportive, but his actions weren't not, it's hard to say. my husband was not in a state of being unsupportive. He's always been supportive of me, but what he did on a daily basis wasn't like, yeah, like, let's do it. I'm going to help you by doing all of these things. And it didn't have to be. He had like a life.
He allowed you to have a space to do what you needed to do.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
But that in itself is supportive.
Exactly.
That is a way of being supportive.
So
it doesn't have to be, you're right, gung-ho, like, I totally agree.
It's checking our expectations. Like, people aren't going to be all in. Maybe you're in a situation and your significant other is never going to want to go to yoga with you and is never going to want to take walks. That is completely okay, as long as they allow you to have the space to do it. And it's worth having those conversations. If the conversations are going in a negative way, it's worth it to have therapy, couples counseling to figure out why. If your spouse is accusing you of wanting to cheat on him or her, because you are starting your fitness journey, that is counseling. Like, that
Absolutely.
is something you just like,
I've unfortunately seen that happen so many times.
Yeah. It's so common, and there's so much to unpack there that
that's usually an issue with the person making the accusations. I don't want to make a sweeping generalization, but that's usually rooted in either insecurity or potentially past experience.
Well, and going back to like those quotes, the quotes that I shared from Needra, she said, when people are hard on you, they're twice as hard on themselves. When people are upset with you for setting a boundary, it's based on their inability to accept the boundaries or their lack of boundaries. And when people place limits on what you can do, they have already limited themselves in the same way. It's hard for us to accept people when they change, when we're used to having like this. We as humans, we like consistency. Maybe not, and this might not be all people, but most people like some there's safety and consistency. And when we have a friend, we know what to expect, or we expect certain behaviors from our significant others, and things start changing, that can be unsettling and uncomfortable. And it can be triggering for them for things that, maybe they experienced in their life that has nothing to do with you. So taking the time to work through those, have lots of conversations, and potentially therapy is beneficial. But most importantly, you have to control the things within your sphere. If your spouse or significant other is coming at you and accusing you of wanting to change your life and get healthy because you want to cheat, that is their problem.
Yeah, 100%.
As a loving, supportive spouse, maybe you want to help them with their problem and go to therapy with them. But that's not you can't control that type of mindset, that type of negativity directed. You can't control that. Like, you just have to focus on what you can do. And
look, ideally it would be nice if everyone had the same goals and aligned, but we don't live in an ideal world. Nothing's perfect in life, right? Nobody's perfect. There is no perfect relationship. There is no, as much as everyone would like to think that there is no perfection ever in anything. And also, look, no, you can never, one thing I learned a long time ago, and boy, did YouTube teach me this, you will never please everybody, no matter what you do, no matter what your intentions are. You'll never be able to please everybody or be everybody's friend or whatever. Someone will always find something wrong or find something to complain about. So it kind of all ties into this, and, I totally agree.
Yeah. So I think that there's more that we could dive into here. It's really hard because I feel like with the way significant others can sabotage each other, it can go deep.
Yeah.
Which is a lot. Like, we're not experts on helping people through marital.
I've got no credentials on my wall saying I'm a marriage counselor.
We only have our experience. Yeah. Yeah. So,
I know my boundaries. That's one of them.
With the most encouragement that I can suggest in that type of situation is I mean, I guess it's not encouragement. The most encouraging thing I feel like you can do in any of these situations is communicate. Communicate in the way that you can. Maybe you don't feel like you can have the conversation with your spouse. Maybe write it down. Maybe you give it to them. Maybe you never give it to them. Beware of like writing things down and giving people letters, because that's a lot. When you unpack everything all at one time, that's generally too much for somebody to be receiving. But if you need to get it out, if you need to figure out how you feel, writing it down is helpful. Counseling is helpful. Doing things that you can do now, and maybe just asking good questions. Why do you feel that way? Why do you feel if I go work out that I'm trying to leave you, or that I don't like? Asking questions like, why do you feel that way? What would make you more comfortable? Would you like to come work out with me?
Yes, including
would you
them.
like to work on your fitness journey with me?
Yeah.
So those are ways that you can start to work through that, and giving the people in your life space and time to adjust to your new lifestyle as you adjust is important too. I feel like sometimes we have expectations.
I think sometimes people feel, a spouse or even a friend can feel left out if someone starts a positive journey, like a fitness journey or weight loss journey, and they did not get included. There was no good communication that occurred. There was no, olive branch or, invitation extended. There can be some feeling of being left out and not included. And, that's totally different than they're not ready to do it, or that's not their own goal. So trying to include your partner or your friend in your positive journey, whatever it may be, can be a really important component that can help mitigate this as well. Because if someone's accusing you of, trying to cheat by, going and getting in shape, if you invite them along, that may go out the window and they'll see, oh, there's nobody. What am I worried about? Like, this is silly. Or, it'll also have quality time spent together doing something positive and productive together. A lot of people don't realize also, this ties into what we said in previous podcasts, where people don't realize how enjoyable, exercise and fitness and all this other stuff, how positive this can be. A lot of people have this feeling or this idea in their head that exercise is torture. It's like a punishment or something. And I'm here to tell you it's not. It's the opposite, actually. Exercise is really a privilege, right? And I could tell you from firsthand experience, when I was injured for about 5 or 6 weeks earlier this summer, I could not exercise. I remember that period of time. Boy, did I realize how much of a privilege it really is, and how much I missed it, and how much of a role it played even in my own mental health and my happiness. Because when I couldn't do it, it really negatively impacted me. I know this is off topic, but I think it's an important part of this, because when I couldn't do it, it was immensely negative for me. And I could not wait until I could get back to it. So the reason I'm saying this example is, a lot of people have this negative talk in their minds about, oh man, I don't want to start an exercise program. It's so hard. It's going to be painful. Well, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. You should feel great after a good workout. You should feel wonderful, like on top of the world, and endorphin high. And it's, really happens. But unless people give it a shot, unless they give it a try and do it on a level that's appropriate to them, they will never know. And they'll never feel that great feeling. They'll never appreciate it. So, I think that's an important thing to add in there, because unfortunately, that's one of the reasons why some people choose to not join their friend or their spouse or whatever on that journey, because they have that way of thinking ingrained in their mind that it's going to be torture. It's going to be horrible. They're going to hate it. But it's not the case. It's actually not the case in reality. And there's always going to be a way that someone can do things that will be enjoyable for them.
I think a good thing to also, and this might be a good thing to sort of end on, and it's something we haven't talked about the entire time. The word sabotage is incredibly negative. To accuse someone of actually intentionally sabotaging you, that's really strong. Like it's a pretty strong accusation. The reality is a lot of times people are not intentionally sabotaging anything. They have no idea how the implications of their actions. And also approaching that in life, like not even just with these types of goals, but a lot of times if you're driving down the road and somebody cuts you off, they didn't single you out and be like, I'm intentionally going to ruin that person's day by pulling over right on top of them. Like
they probably just didn't even see or didn't even realize most of the time.
Exactly. Like we live, I mean, this is so obvious. We live within ourselves. We are all incredibly self-centered people as we go throughout our day, and our actions affect those around us. And it's important to dedicate some energy towards thinking about how our actions affect those around us. But that's not always a natural part of our process, especially when we're overanalyzing and insecure and focusing on things and bettering ourselves. Like we're not always, and then we have like a thorn in our side that's constantly causing us hiccups. And then we're like, why are you sabotaging me? That's the worst way to start a conversation. Like, you've been sabotaging lately. I've been trying to like lose weight, but you've been a sabotage.
Don't be antagonistic like that.
Like, yeah.
That's not going to end well.
No. And the thing is a lot of times people are not going to be aware. They are not intentionally trying to sabotage you. They're not intentionally overstepping. They're not intentionally trying to bring you down. And even if they are not intentionally doing it, if you've had conversations, it is okay to take steps to like remove that friendship with Becky and the pasta. Like, it's okay.
Hey, Becky, I don't know.
To step away.
I'm stepping away from Becky.
If your name is Becky, I'm so sorry. I hate when I do that because I don't remember. I think there was another time Becky. I think you said like Nancy or something. It's like I pick on names. I feel so sorry for all the Karens in the world, like the literal Karen, like people whose name's Karen. I'm like, what a terrible thing. Like your name. I hope you have a good middle name. Like they canceled Karen as a name. It's so sad.
No one's going to be named Karen going
Babysitter
forward.
Club. No, Babysitter Club, like Little Sisters. I read that series when I was like a kid. I used to go to the library and check out all these books. And I like read all the Little Sister Babysitters Club books. And the main character was Karen. She had big glasses. And anyway, poor Karen in Babysitters Club. Like her name's Ruth.
And now poor Becky too.
Yep, I just did it. Best friend Becky eating all of her pasta. So do you have any parting words, Aaron?
You know, I think we said a lot. I think we covered a lot of great stuff today. You know, the only thing I would add is make sure you make time for yourself. I think everybody, a lot of people, they like to try to be everything to everybody, right? A lot of people try to they do put themselves last. These are people who I'm talking about who maybe struggle with self-sabotage and whatnot. And that's a hard position to be in, to be able to put yourself first in some way at times. And, you know, we're all worth it. We're all worth putting our own wants and our own needs first at times. And I don't think that's a selfish thing to do, because how can you be there for other people if you're not showing up for yourself as well? Right. So that alone is a whole nother point that we didn't touch on, but I think it's important to kind of end on that we're all worth putting ourselves first at times in order to be able to take better care of ourselves, to live the best and happiest lives that we can. And so that we can also be there for the people who we want to show up for and who may also rely on us or need our help at times. I just think that's a very important message to kind of, convey towards the end.
They always say, like, put your oxygen on first.
Yeah. How can you help other people if you can't breathe, right?
You pass
out.
So true. Yeah. So, I mean, at the same time too, I had that thought, and then I was like, and when people are drowning, you're supposed to like go up from behind.
It's true.
To help them so that they don't cling on and pull you down.
Yep.
So, so there's There's that. Should have even brought the drowning thing up.
Now we're Debbie Downer. Sorry, Debbie now.
Yeah. Well, just I think being cognizant of your needs.
And you're allowed to have needs and wants. We all are. I know there's a lot of people that have that negative thought in their minds that everyone else is more important than them. They don't matter as much. You know what? We all matter. We all matter. And unfortunately,
that can be something that we hide behind to sabotage.
Yeah.
That sabotage we hide behind because it's comfortable being the one that everybody depends on. It's comfortable being needed. Also, we have a lot going on in life. Like everybody has a lot going on in their lives. And some people, for instance, healthcare workers, they work long shifts and a lot of them, and it's emotionally taxing, especially these days. Well, all days, but especially these days. And it's easy to not take that time for self-care, like Erin's saying. So you are worth taking the moments that you need in order to show up for yourself. And by showing up for yourself, you enable yourself to show up better for other people in your lives, for the people who matter to you most. When you show up for yourselves, you're showing up for the people you love as well in a large way.
Agree.
Thank you so much for this hopefully shorter podcast episode. We're thinking about, Erin and I have been talking offline about potentially doing this more regularly. And we're still trying to figure out what that looks like as far as having talks with a trainer on Tuesdays as part of the podcast, maybe as a segment or maybe full episodes like today. So let us
answering
know.
A question or whatever topic someone may want.
Yeah. So let us know what you think, whether that is shooting us a DM on Instagram, or if you're watching instead of listening, commenting down below. Also, if you have some time and you would like to, we would love it. I would love it if you would leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. So that really helps podcast channels out, I think. Still newer to the podcast world, but I think reviews are like the golden ticket. We would like a golden ticket. We'd like to see Charlie in the chocolate factory. It's kind of dumb. Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. That was it.
It became Charlie's in the end. He won.
That's true. So I was still kind of there. See, this is, you need supportive friends that help you be right. Even if you're wrong. Just kidding. Well, kind of. But it's been fun. I hope that you guys enjoyed listening. I feel like there are still things on this topic that we may cover in the future. It's such a complicated and deep thing. And I think Erin and I have talked about this several times. It starts with us and us taking accountability and checking in with ourselves. Are we focused on what we can control? Or are we spending a lot of time out in the bubble around us that we really have no control? Like we will never have the power to control the things around us, just this little bubble. In the
beautiful bubble that you drew.
Yep. Yeah.
I couldn't let that go.
I'm gonna sell it. I will be starting an Etsy shop. So if you would like your pink eye bubble.
Is that what we're sponsored by today?
Yes. We are sponsored by this lovely piece of art. So scrap paper, expo marker art. This is going to be a whole thing. Canvases are going to be available on my Etsy shop. We're going to call it Pink Eye with April.
Good times.
Well, thanks so much for being here again with us, Erin. And thank you guys for listening. I hope that you have a wonderful week. You are worth doing all the things. You're worth all the hard conversations. You're worth doing everything within your power to live each day a little healthier and a little brighter. Love you guys. And we'll talk to you next time.
Have a great day.